It's super early. I am at the train station and we're going to go on an adventure. I'm going to show you one of my favourite places in the world. This is the small village of Fairbourne in North Wales. It's a place I've been coming my entire life. Apparently I was first brought here when I was a few weeks old and I've been coming ever since. It's the end of June, it's just before the summer holidays. The high season isn't quite here yet, but it's an absolutely fantastic place to visit. But what about the history and the archaeology, I hear you say? Well, as you can see, all along this beach, there is evidence from the Second World War. It was on beaches like this, quite obscure, faraway places that the British didn't want the Germans to land, understandably. So they put up these huge tank traps, which are still quite magnificent to see today. And there's even a bunker down at the other end of the beach, and it's the same along beaches all over this coast. If Hitler had landed, the tanks could have rolled over this place if there weren't these tank traps here, head inland, down the Mouthwick estuary, and Dolgelly is just down there, Mehuntleth, and from there you can go along the roads all the way to the Midlands. So it would have been quite a good invasion position. But of course the invasion never came. Before that, this town, Fairbourne, and across the estuary, Barmouth, were both Victorian settlements, really. They were places for holidaymakers, such as my great-grandfather, Humphrey Packington, who apparently came here at the end of the Victorian era. So it was mostly holidaymakers. The locals tended to live in places like Dolgelly, Towyn further down that way, Llyn further down that way, and various other places. Now, of course, this is mostly Welsh people who live here, and a lot of Brummies from the Midlands. A main feature of the area is the Barmouth Bridge, which crosses over the estuary, made in the 1800s. It allowed the train route to cross over the estuary and go further down to Pwllheli and places down the Llyn Peninsula and further afield. And before that, really, there weren't a huge amount of people here. There never have been. Isolated pastoralists, sheep herders, fishermen, and not much else. Of course, the quarries were a huge thing as well. The Blue Lake just over there, another place that I spent many a happy time in my childhood, swimming around in there and generally having a nice picnic and all that. You can't go in there anymore because Instagrammers ruined it by littering the place, and then the farmer blew up the entrance. So you can look down on it, but you can't go inside. I'll probably go have a look in a bit. But before all that, what I really want to talk about today, as I always do, is the ancient history of the place and the medieval history of the place. So, there is archaeology around here, plenty of it. There's stone circles, there's ancient settlements from the Neolithic, there's Bronze Age burial mounds, there's all that good stuff. Up in these highlands and all around, you can find a lot of it. There's Iron Age hill forts. Behind me, you might be able to see it, you might not. It's a little bit hazy today. Is quite a magnificent hill fort, which I made a video about earlier, which you can watch here. Further along that way is Cadder, great mountain, absolutely massive place. In the foothills, there are Iron Age hill forts. Over on the other side of the estuary, above Barmouth, there's an Iron Age hill fort. Just over there by Llyn, there's an Iron Age hill fort. In terms of the history of this area, however, there's almost nothing. Particularly by the time of the Middle Ages, when in many other areas in Wales and in the rest of the UK, there are snippets of information to go on. There are poetic tales, there are legends, myths, this kind of thing, if not actual chronicles. Sometimes retelling events that happened hundreds of years before in somewhat incorrect ways. But at least they do survive. Here, unfortunately, we have almost nothing. One snippet of information that we do have relates to the great mountain Cadder. which the full title is Cadair Idris, which means Idris's chair. Now Idris, not Idris Elba, though he's got a good name. I don't know if that's based on Cadair Idris or if that's maybe an African name. I don't know. Interesting though. Idris Elba, of course, legend. The giant Idris was a figure from Welsh mythology, although we know almost nothing about him, unfortunately. The idea was that if you spent a night on top of the mountain, you would either gain great wisdom or go completely insane. And it's kind of known as Idris's chair, Idris's throne. And if you look at it from the air, it does kind of look like a throne, interestingly. So we know that people were living here in the post-Roman period. Where else were they going to go? Of course, in many of the lowland areas that were occupied by the Romans, there was a great amount of depopulation. But in places like this, where the Iron Age population practiced pastoralist herding, the land here isn't good enough for things like wheat farming and large-scale industrial agriculture like that with the villas, which was part of the Roman lowland system in Britain. So in the period after the Roman Empire, life didn't change here a huge amount. There's a good argument that the Roman occupation changed very little up here. So surely places like this would have prospered in that time. But there's almost no evidence to speak of. We do have scant little bits of archaeology in the rest of North Wales, places like Dinas Emrys, a little bit further inland by Bethgelert. That's kind of towards Snowdon, into Snowdonia proper. We're kind of beyond Snowdonia here, on the shores of the Irish Sea. But around here, in the land now known as Meirionnydd, there is almost nothing. Where did all the people go? Now, one person who it is especially important to talk about is a mythic, well, semi-mythic, semi-historical figure known as Cynneithr. This was a guy who features essentially in all of the pedigrees in North Wales as a progenitor of the royal houses, particularly in Gwynedd, where he was a really important guy. He's said to have come down from the Old North in Manaw Gododdin, in a place probably around about Lothian, the Scottish borders, that sort of region. And he came down here, supposedly, in the tales recorded by Nennius and other chroniclers like him in the 9th century AD, to reconquer the land from the Irish who had been taking over from beyond the sea. Now, unfortunately, if only there was some more evidence of this on the landscape or in archaeology and hill forts, something like this, but there's nothing really. But at least we have that. So the idea that was remembered anyway, is hundreds of years later, was that he came down here with his sons. There were loads of them, I think like 9 sons or something. And each one of those sons essentially was apportioned a piece of land in this northern kingdom. And that's where we get the name Meirionnydd, because he was one of Cynneithr's sons. Other ones being Ceredigon and things like this. So whether this was just ad hoc added in afterwards, we're unsure. Could have been added in later by medieval chroniclers. It could be a genuine leftover from that time. As is always the case with this time period, we just don't know. So, finally, another important thing to mention is that the things that do survive usually are to do with Christianity. So, in the next town along the shore, Tywyn, quite a big place for this region, there's a church. And in that church, there's some very, very early historic Christian crosses, bearing very early inscriptions in Old Welsh. So things were happening here. It may just be that people lived kind of a quiet life, getting on with worshipping God, tending their crops, tending their animals, and potentially living quite a nice life. It's quite a beautiful place out here. A hard life, but I think that is what makes life worth living. Well, I am headed up here. I'm going to go all the way up to the top of there and have a look around. So let's go. Let's go and see if we can find some more history. So I'm just making my way up to the high ground, and I just wanted to show you something. So this behind me, ferns, Welsh oak, old growth forest. This is the kind of thing that naturally occurs around here. So this kind of beautiful, oh, smells incredible. So much oxygen out here. This was the kind of thing that back in the day people were surrounded by. And they still are now, but we tend to chop this stuff down. This is kind of what much of the west of Britain would have looked like, in fact. And it is what grows back if sort of left to its own devices, in Cornwall, Devon, Dorset, Shropshire even, and pretty much all of Wales, really. And it's absolutely stunning, you know? And to get an idea of what the ancestors were surrounded by, you can come out to a place like this and there's nothing else like it. No, it isn't a monument from Lord of the Rings. This was once one of the entranceways to the quarry up here. 150 years ago, slate quarrying was big business around here. This is what most of the people did who lived down there. It's quite eerie today. It's all just been sort of left. It's like they packed up on the last day, just left all the equipment, never to return. I wonder how long this will take to disappear. No early medieval stuff yet, though. Gonna have to keep looking. Interesting to wonder about all the people who would have worked here back in the day. Harsh life in those days. And they've left quite a bit on the landscape. So where are all the early medieval houses? Where did all of the post-Roman people live? Where were they? Where are they? So I'm up at the top now and come across this. It's kind of attached to this wall here, but it's a whole extra structure. This could be some kind of shelter for sheep. Could be a small little dwelling for people when they were up here in the winter. But this isn't even that old. This is a few hundred years old, tops, and it's already crumbling down. In a few hundred years, this probably won't really be here anymore. And I suppose it's a good example of what happened to the buildings in the medieval period. As I've banged on about before on this channel, people in the past recycled. They would take from previous buildings and the stone and the timber and the resources, they would just reuse them. So maybe that's what's happened here. If these people were building in wood, that's obviously going to be rotting away. But yeah, if anybody knows any evidence of domestic housing in Meirionnydd during the post-Roman period or the early Middle Ages, then let me know. I'm dying to hear about it, because I've scoured everywhere that I know to get my research from, and it's a black hole. So that's today's video, folks. Look at that view. Look at that view. So I've got my hood up now because it's very sunny, and I think I've accidentally burned myself. It's also lots of insects around as well. It's what happens in this part of the country in this time of year. Insects galore. So if you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe, leave me a comment, and yeah, if you ask me a question, I'll try and answer it. Please tell me any information you have as well. And yeah, let's talk. And I'll see you on the next video. Cheers. But what was going on in eastern Anatolia, I hear you ask? Or is that just an attempt for me to shoehorn in an advert for my upcoming tour? Well, it may well be. But in eastern Anatolia at that time, of course, the Western Roman Empire had died, but the Eastern Roman Empire continued. The Romans were still in charge of Anatolia at that time, and they would be for hundreds of years to come. In the 5th, 6th and 7th centuries, the same time that post-Roman Britain had sort of fallen into ruin really, and warring small principalities, the Eastern Roman Empire didn't necessarily flourish, but it was still going, it was still intact, and it was a continuation, direct continuation of the Caesars of times gone by. Emperors still ruled, large armies still went out to do battle, and architecture continued, bathhouses continued being used, engineering continued, all this great stuff. And there's loads of it all through what is now Turkey. In my tour that I'm doing in September alongside History with Kaylee and Dakota of Earth, which you should definitely come with, we will go and see many Roman sites. One of the most fascinating ones that I've been to before is in Sanliurfa, one of the oldest cities in the world. It was actually the city of Edessa, so famous from the Crusades as the seat of one of the Crusader kingdoms for a time until it was reconquered just before the Second Crusade. It was actually the catalyst for the Second Crusade, the fall of Edessa. It has an amazing museum which is called the Mosaic Museum today. So it's this incredible mosaic floor of a vast sprawling palatial building, and we can walk all around it. It's amazing. It's like Fishbourne Palace in southern Britain. Fascinating place, and it's amazing to see the similarities between Britain and the other side of the world at the time, you know, the eastern frontier of Turkey. So it's like almost the Silk Road. We will basically be going onto the Silk Road. And not just that, we're going to go to so many other incredible sites: Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Hattusha, Sogmatar, Haran, a boat trip on the Euphrates River down to the first cities of the world. It's just going to be incredible. The food's great, the landscape's great, the company's going to be great. We're going to talk history all day, from the time we get up, at breakfast, at lunch, on the sites, on the coach, at dinner, after dinner. We'll go on adventures. I'm going to film videos there. You could be in some of the videos. We're going to have an incredible time. We're going to have an incredible time. I want to meet you guys too. I've been doing this nearly 10 years, so as you can imagine, that's nearly a decade. That's a long flipping time to do stuff like this, largely in isolation. So it would be great to meet some of you guys. It's going to be awesome. All the details are down below. Just put history time in when you're booking, so you let them know that I sent you. It's reasonably priced, and the profits all go to charity. What's more? What more can you ask for? So, let's do it. Let's get out there.